Poker's most exclusive table has landed in one of the world's most expensive cities. A seat here will cost you at least £100,000, but it could earn you millions. This is WPT Alpha 8. Posh Mayfair district here at the Palm Beach Casino, where the world's high rollers have gathered for Alpha 8 London. The buy-in for our Texas Hold'em poker tournament is a staggering £100,000, which is more than $160,000 US. I'm Lynn Gilmartin, ready to bring you VIP access to the world of super high-stakes poker. I'm joined by our top-notch commentators, Arlene Najad and Olivier Bousquet, stationed over in the clubwpt.com skybox. Good day, gentlemen.
Good day to you, Lynn. Olivier and I are, of course, excited to be here across the pond alongside yourself and a room full of very illustrious poker players, each of whom have bought in £100,000 to take a seat in our event, and that translates to over $160,000.
This is a re-entry tournament, which means that if any of our current players busts, they can put up another £100,000 and give it another go.
Yeah, it takes a lot of nerve to pull the trigger and buy a second bullet when the stakes are this high. The room does have 2 tables in action currently and several familiar faces who have played in our last event out in Florida, and some faces that we have yet to see.
Our feature table is really the epitome of an Alpha 8 table. We have a few superstars, Scott, Toby, and Steven. Obviously, a legend of poker in Eric Seidel. A couple successful businessmen and poker enthusiasts with Richard Young and Tony G, and even an unknown player in Drew Patel. I've never seen him before. It'll be really interesting to see what his approach to poker is.
Well, so far, it's to open the pot with a raise sitting on Queen Jack offsuit to 2,300. Scott Seaver out of the way. Eric Seidel with pocket 6s in the small blind defends. And now on to Steven Silverman with Ace Jack suited.
Silverman, of course, the champion of our inaugural Alpha 8 event in Florida.
He's had to put $160,000 roughly back into this event as he defends his big blind, and we'll take our first flop of the evening, 3-way. And they do things a little bit differently here at the Palm Beach. One by one, they peel him off the stub. Eric Seidel has flopped bottom set. Nothing much happening for Silverman. Drew Patel, 2 overs and a gut shot straight draw, and the action is checked all the way around. Turn card pairs the board. Seidel has a full house. His opponent's drawing dead. He checks a second time, and Silverman seems like he might be tempted, but instead checks it over to Patel. And it looks like Drew's going to say, if you don't want it, I do.
Yeah, exactly. After 2 checks from 2 players, Drew Patel taking a shot at this pot. We know it's not going to work with Eric sitting back there with a full house. We'll see how he plays it.
10,500.
Raise to 10,500.
And Seidel is going to check raise to 10,500. That makes quick work of Silverman's hand. Back over to Patel, and he knows better than to continue laying it down. What have we learned about him?
Well, just by looking at him and his age at just 21 years old, I'm not surprised if he's a relatively active player, getting involved a bunch and taking shots at pots.
Now, while Seidel took that pot, there has been much action here in London leading up to this point in the event. A8 London kicked off with 10 players drawing their seats, stacking their chips, and assessing the competition. London newcomer, 21-year-old Drew Patel, found himself at a daunting table with 2 high-powered American players, WPT Season 9 World Championship winner Scott Seaver and Alpha 8 Florida champion Steven Silverman. Meanwhile, UK resident high roller Sam Trickett was sharing the felt with the formidable likes of Russia's 2012 EPT high roller winner Igor Kurganov and A8 Florida's 3rd place finisher Jeff Gross. With the competition in full gear, the German contingent arrived with Monte Carlo super high roller champ Max Altergott and his compatriots, young pros Philip Gruesome and Tobias Rankenmeyer. Tobias immediately contributed to Seaver's growing stack. And Canadian Sorel Mizzi arrived next, raising a flag for the Great White North, while Swedish provocateur Victor Blom came in and showed no mercy when he river tripped jacks to take the tournament's first victim, Max Altergott.
Yeah, I'm the first passer, right?
This after just a couple of hours of play. Sorel and WPT champion Antonio Esfandiari also busted early.
You can't win at poker unless you lose. So I just look at losing as if I was paying my taxes. So I paid my taxes today.
I like it.
Heavily.
Heavily is right. $160,000 worth. I don't know, maybe you should get a better accountant, maybe get some write-offs going?
Yeah, I've never thought about losing in those terms, but it's important for poker players to be able to have a good attitude about it, because otherwise it can really get you down.
One thing you learn pretty early on when you're playing is you can't win every session. But you'll try.
If there wasn't luck in poker, it wouldn't be a profitable game.
Back to our featured table, we pick up the action where Drew Patel limped in under the gun. Scott Seaver then raised it with Jack 10 offsuit. It was folded all the way back around to Drew, who then called with his 10-9 offsuit. And the flop. 2 sixes and a tray. Drew checks to Scott.
Not a premium hand for Scott, but trying to take advantage of what he perceives as weakness from Drew, the unknown player, limping under the gun.
6-6-3 on the board, and Scott has fired 7,000 into the pot.
Pretty standard for Scott to take a shot after raising pre-flop.
Oh, but this is not standard. Patel saying hi there.
Yeah, this is a very odd raise. This seems kind of like a kamikaze play, but I wouldn't be surprised if it works in this particular case since Scott has just jack high.
Is Drew showing any youth or inexperience?
You know, it's hard to tell, but the problem with this play is that he's just really not representing very many hands. I mean, could he have, pocket threes or a 6 or something like that? Sure, it's possible, but it's very tough to make such strong hands, and it's not obvious that he would necessarily play them exactly like this, but works in this case because Scott just doesn't have enough of a hand to play back.
And Seaver's going to mine that into his catalog for sure as they continue to build an understanding of the relatively unknown player.
Yeah, I think not just Scott, but all of the players at the table will be very cognizant of that hand and how Drew played it. Definitely an unorthodox line.
Let's get a look at the current chip counts. Tobias Rankenmeyer is at the top of the board with 370,000 in chips. On the short stacks are Steven Silverman and Richard Young with just about 66,000. Button on Tony G, Drew and Seaver in the blinds. Tobias Rankenmeyer will be first to act. And what do you know about Rankenmeyer?
Well, Toby is generally considered one of the very best tournament players.
23.
He says 2,300.
He and I actually played heads up in Monte Carlo a few years ago. Really nice guy, well-respected player. He's part of this contingent of high roller players, a bunch of German players who have been kind of taking this scene by storm.
And you see Max Altergott has actually joined the action. Max was busted at one of our other tables earlier, has had a chance to regroup and raise, what, a little over $160,000 so that he can buy a second bullet. Tobias has actually been a part of big buy-in events in the past, including a $250,000 buy-in in Australia, where he finished second for $1.3 million. Here, he finds himself raising with ace-queen offsuit, and Richard Young is just calling with ace-king offsuit. That could be trouble.
Yeah, it's a little bit dangerous from Richard to not take the lead in this hand, but at the same time, there are a couple hands that he's dominating, so if it comes ace-high or king-high, he might be able to win a big pot from a dominated hand.
Well, without a 3-bet, both blinds come along for the ride, and we'll take this flop 4-way.
Can help you out.
Appreciate it, bro, but would have been enough even without you calling.
Give me my chips back, but nothing's changed, yeah?
A lot of overlapping cards out there.
Yeah, king high, queen high, or ace high flop could be a lot of trouble for at least one of these players.
Burn down. It's 6, 9, 6 on the board. 2 spades. Both Drew and Scott have checked. Toby bet 5,000. And Young calls the 5,000.
Yeah, I don't mind this call by Young. Obviously, he doesn't have a pair, but since the board is so dry, it's reasonable to take another card off.
And the board stays dry. Young also has the advantage of being down to heads up with 2 players mucking, and he's in position against Tobias. Will Tobias fire a second bullet at this pot? The first one always easier than the second. He does indeed, and Young gets away from his ace-king after he doesn't improve.
Strong second barrel from Toby there. Gets Richard to fold the better hand.
Richard not interested in spending another $15,000 on the turn, especially when he has no idea what may happen on the river. You get a look at Max Altergott. If he looks familiar, that's because he actually was felted earlier in the event. He has since rebought for 100,000 pounds. Do you think that players feel more pressure when they're on a second bullet because now you're just so deeply invested into the event?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it also depends on, what kind of plan players had going into the tournament. If they were planning on willing to be putting up 2 or 3 bullets, then as you get deeper towards the end of your slacks, as they say, I think it could put a lot of pressure on players to make sure they play their best, maybe play a little bit more conservatively than they would their first or second bullet.
And I would imagine other players at the table are cognizant of the fact that he's on his second bullet and maybe a little bit tighter than he was on his first bullet. As we get caught up to speed on the action, it's pocket eights for Toby. Back-to-back raises, this time to 2,400. And he has picked up one caller in the form of Richard Young, who has 5-6 suited.
We're going to see another pot here between Toby and Richard Young.
Flop is ace, jack, 3.
Not a great flop for either hand here.
Round 2. And this time, Tobias checks the flop. Richard checks behind him. And the turn card is a 7. Good-looking card for Young.
Yeah, all of a sudden, Richard picks up a gut shot straight draw and a flush draw.
And Tobias has just shut it down, checks again with the pocket eights.
450.
Young bets 4,500. And Tobias simply mucks the pocket eights. Seems like he was done with his hand by the time the flop showed up.
Yeah, I like the way Richard played the hand, picking up equity and betting it. Toby played his hand a little bit weak, but at the same time, he had played the hand previously very strong. Maybe he has a good read on Richard.
Alpha 8 is brought to you by ClubWPT.com. Fun, exciting poker you can play for free.
Well, I'm in a London cab with Eric Seidel. We're going a few miles south to play lawn bowls. You've definitely got the title of King of High Roller events.
I had a very good year in 2011 in the High Roller. So.
What's your favorite place?
Well, this is my favorite place. I like playing in London. I'm a New Yorker, so London is very much like New York for me. I really, when I'm away from the poker table, I lead a pretty ordinary life. I don't really have a bowler lifestyle.
Play some bowls. After our 4 balls have gone, it's the one that's closest that determines the winner. What are you gambling on it, Eric?
£5 total for the whole thing, right?
Per game?
Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's such a gambler.
I'm trying to protect you. I don't want to. Oops, that's bad.
Oh, yes!
No!
It was so kind.
Does that count? Does that help her?
It sure do.
It counts. It counts. That's very good. That's excellent.
It's unbelievable how close you are. Wow.
See that? Got it. Can we make it £10, Eric?
You're
Are you getting
natural.
this?
That's very, very good.
You're gonna get that.
That's amazing. I'm buried.
Oh, it just tucked right in front of your eyes.
It's like the last insult is just boom. Don't you dare push my hand away. No! This is a disaster. I think we spent more time here than Bill Brothers.
Okay, I think I spoke too soon with the trash talk. You might be
I got a sweat.
sneaky last one.
No! Disaster! That's terrible.
15 sweet pounds. Well, Eric,
Oh, you got me
good
again.
at poker, but I guess I'm great at lawn bowls.
I think so. I've learned my lesson.
Don't gamble with women.
I can't believe Eric didn't know that Lynn comes from a long line of illustrious lawn bowlers. Yeah, that's her lineage. And those 15 pounds, that'll get her, what, like 4 blocks in a black cab in London? Probably the most expensive cabs on earth. As we get back to our feature table, Steven Silverman with 9-4 suited lays it down to Richard Young, who's been rather active in the early going. He picks up King-Queen offsuit, and he's going to raise it up to 2,500 with the blinds at 500 and 1,000. Ante's at 100. Fold it around to Scott Seaver now. He doesn't like 8-4 off, and you can't blame him. Pocket eights, though, for Max Altergott. We should see some action out of him. Max, of course, was felted earlier. He's on his second bullet now, and we've talked about how that may impact a player's approach to the game moving forward.
Yeah, I think, when you're on your second bullet, you might tend to be a little bit more conservative, maybe a little bit less willing to take risks, because you really don't want to end up losing 2 bullets.
Now, Max just called, as did Eric Seidel with ace-10 offsuit, and the flop was 4 Trey deuce with a couple of clubs.
Pretty good flop for pocket eights.
And Max bets 4,300 after both Seidel and Young checked to him.
Yeah, it was check to Max.
12-5.
And Eric raises on the flop here.
Check raising.
Yeah, it's this very interesting play. Eric has, a gut shot straight draw, 2 overcards, and a backdoor flush draw. I actually like this play by Eric. It's a very aggressive, very strong play, especially against someone like Max, who, you know, theoretically could be taking a shot in position here without much of a hand. We know that Max has an overpair himself, but even with this overpair out, Eric does have a number of outs to catch up and take the lead in the pot.
A three of diamonds, of course, not one of those outs, and Eric is staring at a pot of 33,800, but rather than shut it down, he fires 20,000. Now, how do you feel when you have pocket eights?
It's a good-sized bet there by Eric. I mean, I think you could make an argument for folding or for calling. Max not going anywhere with his 2-8s.
Yeah, he makes the call and brings the pot to 73,800.
It'd be interesting to see if Eric bets another club on the river.
Well, it's a spade, so he doesn't have that option, and Seidel shuts it down. Max quickly checks behind him, and will be very relieved to see Eric turn over ace-10 offsuit. Max happily rolling over his pocket eights.
Holding on for dear life there with 2-8s. Very happy that Eric did not fire the river.
Let's get over to our outer table, where Sam Trickett finds himself all in with King-9 suited against Victor Blom, better known as Isildur in the online world. Victor has pocket queens, and Sam is hunting for a king. The flop of Jack 8-7 means he's also got a straight draw. 5 on the turn doesn't get him there, and the river is a deuce. And that is the end of the road for high-stakes player Sam Trickett.
Yeah, Victor is such an aggressive player. Sometimes his opponents will make crazy plays against him, and when he picks up big hands like pocket queens, he can turn into big pots.
Well, we'll find out whether or not Trickett is going to rebuy shortly. Meanwhile, Steven Silverman is being relocated from our feature table to the outer table. That, of course, because we need to keep those tables balanced. Can't have a full game on one side and a short game on the other.
And unfortunately for Steven, there just really aren't any soft spots in this tournament, so it's not like you're moving to an easier table.
Nobody has 100?
I'm just trying to figure out why Tony's...
Perhaps Antonio thinks there are some soft spots in the tournament because it appears that he is lobbying for funds, looking for that second bullet. No dice over at the outer table, so he's come over to a different bank. Oh, and it looks like the Bank of Yang has approved Esfandiari's application.
And again, this type of situation happens from time to time. Poker players will lend each other what seems like huge, just immense sums of money with no contract, nothing, just just your word and your reputation to stand on.
23.
Antonio certainly has no shortage of credit in the poker community. King-7 suited for Tobias Rankenmeyer. Meanwhile, at the feature table, he has put in a raise to 2,300. A call from the pocket nines of Eric Seidel. And now pocket jacks for Tony G.
Tony been pretty quiet thus far.
Well, he's going to make some noise, though. 7,700 decibels worth.
Good size 3-bet here.
And Tobias out of the way. Back over to Eric now.
Eric's sitting on close to 50 big blinds.
He's deep enough to make a call here and take the flop, isn't he?
Yeah, I think so, but looks like he is playing it a little bit more aggressively and moving all of his chips in the middle. Wow, that is an aggressive play by Eric Seidel with just 2 9s.
Hard not to call.
Oh, and Tony doesn't like it much.
Yeah, I mean, Tony's in a kind of a tough spot. I mean, Eric could easily have an overpair or a hand like ace-king, but if he does decide to call, he'll be very pleased.
Yeah, Tony does make that call, and there's the good news.
A little bit ambitious by Eric. I don't think Tony is such an aggressive player that this will work all that often.
Well, here comes the flop. Jack 8-10. Tony has top set, but of course, Eric has flopped an open-ender. He's looking for a 7 or a queen to crack Tony's jacks.
One of the best flops Eric could hope for that had a jack on it.
Oh, and that's one of the worst turns. It leaves Seidel drawing dead.
Good luck, guys.
I got a rebuy for us.
You think Eric's the kind of guy that's looking for a second bullet? I heard Richard Young is lending.
You know, you never know with Eric. Obviously, he's had an incredible amount of success. I mean, we'll just have to wait and see what Eric decides.
Well, when we come back, the magician rejoins the action.
What do I do? Will you catch this?
Find out how a sports injury sidelined one player's dreams of glory, but led him to victory on the felt. Log on to ClubWPT.com and join Lynn as she has tea with Sam Trickett. ClubWPT.com. Fun, exciting poker you can play for free.
Welcome back to the elite world of super high-stakes poker, WPT Alpha 8. Tonight's event is coming from the Palm Beach Casino in Mayfair, one of London's most exclusive districts, where the high price of this tournament fits right into this Tony neighborhood.
Is Lynn out and about in London?
You know, every time I see Lynn, it looks like she's having the time of her life.
Well, you know who else is having the time of their lives? These guys, because they get to play high-stakes poker against some of the best in the world. And let's face it, they love the competition. Blinds have gone up to 6 and 1,200. Antes have doubled to 200. And you'll notice the magician has taken a seat at the table.
I'm going to be very nitty now.
He has 100,000. That's what you get when you re-enter. Meanwhile, Richard Young is having a good time with King Jack offsuit. He opens for a raise to 3,000. And Tony G looks down at Ace Jack of hearts. He's just going to call. No need to isolate.
Yeah, I mean, I think Tony could consider 3-betting with Ace Jack of hearts, but I think the more standard play would be just call and see a flop.
Max Altergott gets involved with Ace 5 offsuit.
Getting a pretty good price from the big blind with 2 people already in.
We take the flop 3-way, and it's 10-5 queen, all diamonds. Max has the nut flush draw and bottom pair. Richard has an open-ended straight draw, and Tony with the Broadway draw. Turn card, the 9 of hearts, and Richard has made the nut straight.
Now, from Max's point of view, after both Richard and Tony check the flop, it's not unreasonable to try to bet here, even not necessarily for value with just a pair of fives, but he also has the ace of diamonds, and is just taking control of the pot.
Well, Richard chose to smooth call with the nut straight, considering 3 diamonds are out there. It's not the nuts. Tony G's out of the way. We're down to heads up, and look at the river. A third 5 from Max. He may not have thought 5s were good once Richard called, but now he's got to believe his hand is good.
Yeah, this is the perfect card for Richard Young, because now Max is definitely going to bet for value, and he does make a big bet here.
16,800.
So big that I don't think Richard can even raise here. With 3 diamonds and a paired board, looks like Richard just calls with the straight, and Max a little bit disappointed to have value bet the worst hand.
Yeah, he was ready to show his hand, and then he wasn't.
In poker, we call that value cutting, when you bet for value, expecting to have the best hand, but then run into an even stronger hand.
Trips. Huh? Trips. Lunkin, I feel like this table is a lot more quiet, but it's the same table. And Tony G's here, and it's more quiet.
First of all,
how is that possible?
Tony G's scared. He has a reputation to protect these days. You know, he's a government man. He has to be careful what he says.
That's right.
Times are
I have
different.
all the people
on
watching.
camera. He has all the people watching, all his, you know, representatives.
Is this true, Tony?
Represented.
It is true.
He's running the Lithuanian government.
Talk at the table has turned to Tony G's political aspirations.
I'm not going to play poker there.
One-time Australia
I'll play
resident.
poker during the tournament.
Now calls Lithuania home and is running for the European Parliament.
I can't gamble. With the future, right?
Pocket kings for Richard Young. He makes it 3,000 to go.
A vote for Tony G is a sure bet. That's what you need. You need me to do your campaign managing.
That would be good.
And ace-king suited for Tobias Rankenmeyer.
Pretty big cooler pre-flop here for ace-king suited, an extremely strong hand.
He's the big stack at the table right now, and he is going to 3-bet it to 9,000 total, back over to Richard's kings. And he says, all right, how about 20 more on top of that? 29,000 total. You getting anything from Young's body language here?
I mean, he does look comfortable, but I don't think it matters for Toby. His hand is just too strong
All in.
against Richard's stack to consider folding ace-king suited.
Yeah, Toby moved all in. Richard made the call, and he's all smiles, isn't he?
It's actually not that bad. Yeah. Shape.
Yeah, not bad.
Young needs to avoid an ace on the board. So far, so good, as it reads 6, 9, and I promise the third one's on the way.
Now I better.
The deuce of spades.
I feel more comfortable. An 8 would be great.
That's a good board for 2 kings.
I'm going to buy some insurance. Insurance.
Yeah, you can buy it.
Insurance. 12 to 1 now.
12 to 1.
You want to take some insurance? 12 to 1.
8 on the turn changes nothing, and all Richard Young's got to do is dodge an ace on the end to double through the chip leader at this table. And he's going to do just that.
Richard very excited to double up. And, you know, it's great to see such enthusiasm.
Nice hand.
He'll collect his pot. Meanwhile, at the outer table, another pocket king situation. This time it's Igor Kurganov up against Jeff Gross, our third-place finisher in Florida. Gross with pocket 5s. Can't hit on the flop, can't hit on the turn, can't hit on the river.
See you later, man. Might be back, I don't know. Good luck.
And Jeff Gross, who looks like he might be sharing closets with Antonio, is going either in search of another bullet or a black cab. Back at the feature table now, ace-queen offsuit for Drew Patel. He has opened the action with a raise to 2,700, and he has been called by the Jack-9 offsuit of Richard Young in the big blind. Their heads up to a flop of 10-4 king rainbow. Gut shot straight draw for Young. Broadway draw for Drew, whose ace high is best. Young checks it over to him. And Drew's going to bet 3,500.
Drew looking for Richard's jack, and Richard looking for Drew's queen here.
Young makes the call. 7,000 more slide into the middle, bringing the pot to 14-4. Turn card pairs the board. Young checks. Now, what are you thinking if you're Drew? Fire again with the ace high and the backdoor draw there?
Yeah, I think it's reasonable to fire the turn, but I think checking is also perfectly acceptable.
Pot control, of course, that's what Patel opts to do. And on the river, Young senses an opportunity as the 7 peels off. He just has jack high.
Yeah, I don't mind the flop call if you're Richard, as long as you're going to bet in a situation like this. So I actually don't mind the way Richard's played the hand. Drew with just ace high looks like he's considering a call.
Well, the bet's only 5,400. That's kind of on the small side.
That's true. I think the bet size is definitely a clue for Drew and gives him a pretty good price. With just ace high, I think a lot of times he's going to be running into a value bet from Richard, but in this particular case, he wins the pot.
And you better believe that there is a table full of seasoned professionals paying attention to each and every one of young Drew Patel's moves.
Yeah, we haven't seen too much of Drew, but my sense early on is that he's the type of player who likes to get involved. We just saw he's not afraid to make a big call with ace high, and we'll have to see throughout the rest of the tournament how he fares.
Our WPT Alpha 8 London event rolls on. Each of the folks sitting at our tables have invested £100,000 and some even more.
That's right. This is a re-entry tournament, and 2 of the players at our featured table, Max Altergott and Antonio Sfondiari, have already busted and re-entered, which means they're in for £200,000.
And let's take a look at the chip counts. Top of the board is the German, Tobias Rankenmeyer, and at the bottom of the board, you'll notice another German, Max Altergott. And there is one of the newcomers that we talked about, Drew Patel, just 21 years of age from Portsmouth. He's got ace-queen offsuit and makes it 3,000 to go.
I think it's really good.
And why do some players opt for the min-raise of 2,400 and others decide to put 3,000 in there? Is there really even a difference?
You know, there is a small difference. You know, first of all, you give the big blind a worse price to call when you make it a little bit bigger. You also make it more expensive for someone to 3-bet you. But a lot of it is a function of how deep the stacks are. When the stacks start to get a little bit more shallow towards the end of the tournament, you'll start to see more min-raises.
Patel has picked up both Sfondiari and Tony G. They'll take the flop 3 ways, and that flop, ace, queen, jack. Patel with aces and queens. He's got the best hand. Tony G's got the Broadway draw. Antonio with just a pair of jacks. Patel bets 4,000. And Antonio quickly lays it down. And now Tony G has raised it to 10,000, making it 6K more to go.
Tony does have some equity. I mean, he has a gut shot straight draw and a backdoor flush draw. I don't like this raise, though, because it just represents so little. I don't think Tony would even raise if he had queen jack or ace jack. Drew Patel is now re-raised to 17,000, putting Tony in a very awkward spot.
And Tony G invests an additional 7,000 with just the naked king high here.
Not to mention he's out of position. He is getting a great price. The raise is very small, but still, Tony out of position without much of a hand.
4 on the turn. Tony G quickly checking over to Drew.
And that 4, not a scare card for Drew Patel. His ace-queen still looking very strong here.
And he's going to check it.
Yeah, I don't understand this check at all.
Oh, a disaster rolls off on the river. Tony G now with the best hand.
40,000.
This is a huge bet by Tony, and Drew immediately, you know, takes the earphones out and pays attention. He doesn't like this play at all. Now, it's very tempting to now blame Drew Patel for checking the turn and letting Tony G get there.
Call. I would have had to bet any river, so it was a good call.
We're just unlucky.
Drew very disappointingly pays off Tony and sees his king deuce of hearts.
Kind of floating when you check the turn. It put me under pressure. At least the 10 arrived.
Well, he really needed it.
I called the 7. He was trying to play around with me a bit. If you pump it harder, then you get the, you know, honest. I mean, what's 7? That's like, what is this? It's not online here. Against me, you got to make it like 30 or something, right? For me to think I'm going to call 7. I was proud of you that it was a good call. You made a really good call.
Yeah, I lost my chips. Good call.
Oh, well, you're unlucky. I mean, now you have to call me every time, like a loose slot machine, and hope for the best. That's all you can do. Now you don't know where I am, right? That's the best policy, right? When you don't know, you just call.
Tony G alluding to the small raise that Drew made on the flop. Not just winning the pot, but then giving him a verbal needle after that.
Yeah, it's always nice to get lucky and then teach the other guy something. Tony has a reputation of being an active player.
And a very talkative one at that.
Yeah, and that talk is not always the most courteous in nature. Meanwhile, in the cutoff, Scott Seaver picks up ace-king suited and makes it 2,800 to go.
For those who don't know, Scott Seaver is really one of the absolute very best tournament players in the world. In my mind, he might actually be the favorite in this field and any field that he enters.
Former student at Brown University, our season 9 $25,000 buy-in champion. He took home $1.6 million and change for that effort. And he is heads up to the flop. Board is Jack 8-7 with a couple of hearts. Antonio defended from the big blind with King 10 off and has flopped a gut shot straight draw.
44.
7,600 in the middle, and Antonio is going to bet 4,400.
Now, I think Antonio leads out of position here for a couple of reasons. One, he has some equity, but not enough in his mind to check call. And two, because a flop like Jack 8-7 is much more likely to hit Antonio's defending range than it is Scott Seaver's opening range.
Well, the board is paired on the turn, and Antonio hasn't gotten rid of Seaver just yet, so he's going to try to get rid of him again, this time with a bet of 8,600. Twice the size of his flop bet of 4,400.
Can't imagine Scott going anywhere with 2 overcards and a nut flush draw.
He makes the call.
You know, on top of everything we've said, it's also just very unorthodox for the out-of-position player to lead into the original raiser.
And look at this river card. Antonio thinks that he's hit something with King 10. Finally, he's got kings and 7s with a jack kicker. But little does he know he's up against the ace-king of Scott Seaver.
Yeah, Antonio going from bluffing on the flop and the turn to now trying to bet for value as he's rivered top pair.
16,300 is the number. Action on Seaver.
I think Seaver is thinking about whether he wants to raise now that he's rivered a king with an ace kicker, but given the line that Antonio's had throughout the hand, I don't think Scott can really contemplate doing anything but just call.
Well, Seaver makes the call, and he'll be happy to see King 10. Gives Antonio a look at ace-king, and that's not the way Esfandiari scripted his re-entry.
It's another instance of somebody out of position trying to bet for value with the worst hand. At these stakes, players are trying to bet so thinly for value that sometimes they're betting for value with the hand that's not even the best hand.
Looking for high roller excitement without the high roller risk? Go to clubwpt.com now and play in our Alpha 8 high roller play chip tournaments and ring games for a chance to be crowned champion. Welcome back to WPT Alpha 8 London. We're in the middle of Playdown at the Palm Beach Casino in Mayfair, where a collection of talented international players have invested at least £100,000 each in hopes of becoming the alpha player who takes home a bounty worth of a king. Action at the feature table is in full gear, so let's tally-ho to Ali and Olivier over in the clubwpt.com skybox.
Thanks, Lynn. Olivier and I have been having fun watching this feature table so far. Plenty of fireworks, and we get a look at what those fireworks have done to the chip stacks. Tobias Rankenmeyer up top at $334,000 and change. And down below on the short stack is Drew Patel with just $25,100. The blinds are at 8 and 1,600 now. Ante's at 200. Button is on Richard Young. Tony G and Drew Patel are in the blinds. and the action has been folded around to Antonio Esfandiari, who has less than half of the $100,000 he got for his re-entry to start this hand, and he's going to put 3,800 of that into the middle here on a raise.
One thing you can say about Antonio is that he is persistent. Even though he's lost a number of chips, he's still raising it up.
Easy defend from the big blind for Drew Patel and his king-9 suited, and the flop 5 trade deuce. I'd say Antonio likes it.
Yeah, Antonio has flopped what we call the wheel, which is the straight starting at the ace and ending at the 5. An absolute monster hand for Antonio.
38.
It's been checked over to him.
A little bit unlucky for him. Drew has really nothing and can't really play back or even call.
Well, there's two pieces to running good in poker. It's not just making big hands, it's finding people who will pay you off when you've got them.
Yeah, a lot of times you want your opponent to have a strong hand just slightly weaker than your hand.
Let's get back to the feature table. Folded over to Tobias Rankenmeyer, who don't adjust your sets, has Queen 5 offsuit, and has decided to make it 4,000 to go.
Yeah, I really don't understand this play. I mean, I know that Toby is the chip leader, so he's going to be opening with a little bit of a wider range than normal, but I would never include a hand like this in my opening range. It just plays terrible post-flop, and I don't understand it.
How do you like the smooth call by Richard Young with ace-queen offsuit, which has, of course, invited Scott Seaver into the pot, who has 8-6 suited in the big blind?
I think it's perfectly reasonable. He should definitely have considered at least 3-betting and probably do it from time to time, but calling is just fine.
The flop, all hearts, 9-7 deuce. Seaver checks his open-ender, and it's on to Tobias, who checks as well. Richard Young, happy to knuckle. And the turn, a 4th heart, it's the ace. Young now with the best hand. Action on Scott Seaver. And he is going to bet into the field for 6,400.
Yeah, Scott's flop check was pretty natural since he just called a raise out of position. But when both Toby and Richard check the all-heart flop, I think Scott has now assumed that neither one of them have a big heart, and he's tried to make a bet on the turn here to take it down.
Of course, he gets through Tobias, but Richards is saying not so fast. He likes his ace-queen and makes the call. And the river card is a 5th heart, the queen of hearts. These two are now playing the exact same hand.
Yeah, now that there's a flush on the board, they both are playing this flush, and any heart that either player had would make a higher flush.
And Young is bet 13,000. A quick fold from Seaver, and Richard, 2-11 in progress.
Richard decides not to allow the board to play, takes a shot with a bluff on the river, and wins the pot.
We're back in jolly old England, London to be specific, and the Mayfair district, home to the Palm Beach Casino and our second ever WPT Alpha 8 event. We have 7 players at our feature table right now. On the short stack, young Drew Patel, and not far behind him, Antonio Esfandiari, who is on his 2nd bullet, but looking very relaxed, despite being in for over $300,000 US.
How did they react?
No, I said I always wanted to.
Oh, you wanted to?
Yeah, I never had.
I thought it happened.
No. But I think also poker players care about their reputation a lot.
He and Richard Young fold over to Tony G. And not even Tony wants to play 3-4 offsuit. Among the more active players, more creative players at the table. Pocket queens for Patel. He's going to open for a raise to 3,600.
Patel starting the hand with just over 12 big blinds. This min raise with 12 big blinds might look a little bit suspicious.
Ace-6 suited for Tobias. He is the big stack.
And he's in the big blind, so there's no one after him.
And he's going to put Patel all in. Patel will gladly make the call and be happy to see that he's up against ace-6 of diamonds. So far, he is in the lead, but you know how it works. You gotta avoid the ace on the board.
Drew in a great position here to double up.
And the flop, a jack, a 4, and an ace. Patel not looking good anymore. And he is rooting for a queen to hit the turn. Instead, it's a king, and that changes things.
Yeah, it gives him a few more outs. Any 10 would give him a straight at this point.
6 outs once for Drew Patel. Otherwise, it's time to hit the ATM for another 100,000 pounds. Can he get lucky? No, he cannot. Tobias has eliminated Drew Patel.
Drew was pretty active on the table, getting involved in a number of pots. Sometimes that strategy can be pretty expensive, especially against such tough competition that we have here.
And we send him over to some other tough competition. Lynn Gilmartin.
Drew, queens against a6, he hit his 3-outer. That has to be tough.
Yeah, it happens. See, I've seen it so many times. I don't. It's one of those things that just got to put up with it.
You're still smiling.
Yeah, why complain? Why not smile?
Well, I don't know too many 21-year-olds that can light a match to 100,000 pounds and then have that attitude about it, but congrats to you, young man, for having arrived at that financial state.
It's a special breed of player, the guys that are putting up this kind of money to play this level of poker.
Let's get back to the feature table. It's a heads-up pot between Tony G and Antonio Esfandiari. Tony has flopped top pair with Queen 10 offsuit, and the board reads Queen 6-3, giving Antonio a pair of sixes.
Antonio started this hand with about 30 big blinds, close to 50,000 in chips.
And he is the pre-flop raiser here. Tony defended from the blind. Antonio, continuation betting in the amount of 5,100, and Tony G check raises to 12,000.
Now, I think Antonio, could have thought about maybe checking back with middle pair, medium kicker here. He decided to go ahead and bet. Tony, really unpredictable player, raising here with top pair and just a medium kicker.
Oh, look at that. A little bit of a balk from Antonio. Looked like he was about to ship it all in. Looked up at Tony. Maybe saw something he didn't like and pulled it back. Is that even legal?
I think that's pretty borderline. Antonio's actually known for doing things like that, having a chip in his hand and pretending to throw it in the pot, trying to see if he can pick something up off of his opponent. It's one of those kind of old school live player tricks. But Antonio ended up moving his chips in the middle there.
How much?
That's a good sign.
I don't know, Tony G might also be able to pick something up from Antonio.
I call. All in a call. I'm ahead, obviously, right? Otherwise, it wouldn't be cool.
Antonio started this hand with 30 big blinds, so to put his entire stack in here with just a 6 is very ambitious play, and that's part of what makes Tony G so tough to play against, is that he gets his opponents to make these crazy plays because he himself is playing so unpredictably.
Tony hits trip queens. Oh, and he's drawn dead as of the turn.
Sorry?
You're good at the turn.
I'm good at the turn today.
Good luck, guys.
Thanks, buddy.
Okay, thanks.
Richard, don't forget text me.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, if you forget, it's okay.
Antonio advising Richard to give him a call. After all, they do have a little number to settle up on.
That was a good one,
Antonio,
Yes.
we meet again.
We meet again, of
2
course,
bullets in one day.
Yeah, that's it for me.
That's it?
Yeah, 200,000 sterling is a lot of cheap.
That is a lot. So what happens now? What do you do now when you bust out of a tournament like this?
You just carry on with life. You have to exist somewhere, right? So I'm going to take my body and go exist.
All right, well, sorry to see you go, Antonio.
Okay, see you later.
Bye. Back to you guys.
So we've lost one body, but we've still got 11 warm ones inside our poker room right now. And with registration still open, that field could grow. All it takes is 100,000 pounds after all. One thing is for sure, there's no limit to just how high the stakes can go in an Alpha 8 event. On behalf of Lynn Gilmartin and Olivier Bousquet, I'm Ali Najad saying good night from the Palm Beach Casino in London.